So Princess Anne has basically locked Camilla out of part of Sandringham, and the way she did it is honestly more interesting than the fact that it happened at all, because this isn't some dramatic screaming match or a leaked email or whatever we usually get from royal gossip. This is lawyers, actual legal paperwork. Princess Anne had her legal team formally document usage rights to a specific wing of the Sandringham estate, which means Queen Camilla can't use that space for the summer retreat she was apparently planning. And that's where this gets weird, because the royal family doesn't really do lawyers when it comes to family property. They do informal agreements, they do tradition, they do quiet understandings that have existed for generations. The fact that Princess Anne felt the need to get this in writing says something about how broken those informal understandings have become. Before I get into why this matters and what it actually reveals about the dynamic between these two women, I just want to quickly say, if you enjoy these deep dives into royal family dynamics, hit subscribe and join us here at Crown Watch. We break down the stories behind the headlines every week. All right, let's get into it. So here's what's actually happening. Sandringham isn't like Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle. Those are part of the Crown Estate, which means they belong to the nation in a sort of complicated historical trust situation. Sandringham is different. Queen Victoria bought it in 1862 as a private gift for her son, the future King Edward VII, and it's been passed down from monarch to monarch ever since as private property. It doesn't belong to the state, it belongs to the king personally. We're talking over 20,000 acres of farmland in Norfolk with several residences on the grounds. There's the main Sandringham house, there's Wood Farm Cottage, which is where Prince Philip lived during his retirement, and there's Anmer Hall, which is where Prince William and Catherine have their country home. This estate has always been the monarchy's private sanctuary. It's where the family gathers for Christmas. It's where Queen Elizabeth spent their final years. It's the place where they go to not be on display, and because it's privately owned by whoever is on the throne, access to the different residences has always been handled through family agreements rather than legal contracts. It's been based on trust and custom. And that system works fine until trust breaks down. The tension between Princess Anne and Queen Camilla isn't new. This goes back decades, all the way to the complicated personal history surrounding King Charles and Camilla's early relationship in the 1970s. When Charles married Diana, that created major fractures within the family, and the eventual collapse of that marriage, along with everything that played out publicly, left wounds that never fully healed. Camilla faced years of intense public criticism before she was gradually accepted as Charles's spouse and eventually became queen consort. Meanwhile, during that exact same period, Princess Anne was building her reputation as the most disciplined and duty-focused member of the family. She's consistently been the hardest-working royal, doing hundreds of engagements every year while keeping her personal life relatively private. Her approach to royal duty is famously straightforward. The institution comes first, always, and that fundamental difference in perspective means Anne and Camilla have often ended up on opposite sides of internal family debates. Anne is practical and uncompromising. Camilla's approach tends to reflect personal relationships and social connections that existed long before she officially joined the royal family. According to sources close to palace circles, the dynamic between the two women is polite but distant, mutual tolerance rather than genuine warmth. Most of the time, that tension has stayed in the background, but recent events seem to have pushed it to the surface. The thing that appears to have triggered this current situation is the ongoing problem with Prince Andrew. Andrew's fall from public life has been one of the most dramatic stories in recent royal history. After everything that came out about his association with Jeffrey Epstein, Andrew was stripped of his remaining royal titles and removed from official duties. He eventually had to leave Royal Lodge in Windsor and move to Wood Farm, which is that much smaller property on the Sandringham estate. The situation got even more complicated when new legal developments put Andrew under additional scrutiny and actually drew police attention to the Sandringham grounds. The optics were terrible for the family. According to royal sources, Princess Anne was genuinely concerned about Andrew's well-being during this period. And look, I get that Andrew is deeply unpopular and for good reason, but from Anne's perspective, he's still her brother. She reportedly advocated for him to be treated with basic dignity, even as the institution was distancing itself from the whole situation. Queen Camilla apparently took a much harder line. Her view, according to sources, was that maintaining any appearance of support for Andrew risked reopening wounds the monarchy had worked very hard to close. She believed protecting the institution meant keeping maximum distance from Andrew and his problems. So you can see how this created a direct conflict. Anne was arguing for family loyalty and basic compassion. Camilla was arguing for institutional protection and public perception. Both positions are defensible in their own way, but they're completely incompatible. And this disagreement over Andrew appears to have taken existing tensions between Anne and Camilla and made them much more acute. When you're already on opposite sides of a fundamental question like how to treat a disgraced family member, it's not surprising that other disputes start to feel more charged. That's the context for what happened next. Princess Anne's legal representatives formally documented and secured usage rights to a specific wing of the Sandringham estate that has historically been used by her family. Now, this is important to understand clearly. Anne is not claiming ownership of the land. Sandringham still belongs to King Charles as his private property. What Anne has done is convert informal family arrangements into formal legal agreements. This kind of thing actually happens all the time in large family estates across Britain. When multiple family members rely on the same properties for generations, lawyers create documented occupancy rights or licensing agreements to prevent future disputes. It's not unusual in aristocratic families. What makes it unusual here is that the royal family has historically relied almost entirely on informal understandings for this stuff. For decades, nobody felt the need to get lawyers involved in who stays where at Sandringham. The fact that Anne decided formal documentation was necessary suggests she no longer trusted the informal system to protect her household's access. The timing is particularly pointed. There had been quiet discussions about Queen Camilla possibly spending more time at Sandringham as a summer retreat. Camilla has always loved the estate's grounds and landscape. With King Charles typically spending extended periods of the summer at Balmoral in Scotland, Sandringham seemed like an appealing option for Camilla to have a quieter, lower-profile stay while remaining within the royal orbit. But by formalizing her household's rights right now, Anne has effectively ensured that the wing associated with her family cannot simply be reassigned. The practical result is straightforward. A door that might have been opened through family discussion has now been closed through legal documentation. And this is where it gets really interesting if you think about what Camilla is actually losing here. Camilla has had a personal sanctuary for decades, long before she became queen, Raymill House in Wiltshire. That was her private escape, the place where she could step away from the pressures of royal life and maintain some independence. Even after marrying Charles, Raymill remained deeply connected to her sense of privacy and personal space. But recently, there have been reports that Camilla has been adjusting her living arrangements and integrating more fully into the royal estate system, letting go of some of that external independence. So the idea of having a summer retreat at Sandringham wasn't just about convenience. It was about finding a new private space within the royal framework, a replacement for the independence she's been gradually giving up. And now that possibility has been blocked, not by a family disagreement that could potentially be resolved through conversation, but by legal paperwork. That's much harder to undo. Whether Camilla had specific plans for that exact wing, or whether Anne's move was preemptive, the outcome is the same. A potential retreat has become unavailable, and it was made unavailable through a formal process that sends a very clear message about boundaries. The position this puts King Charles in is genuinely difficult. Sandringham belongs to him personally, but this dispute involves two of the most important people in his life, his sister and his wife. Both of them are known for having strong personalities and firm convictions, and Charles relies on both of them in different ways. Anne has always been one of the monarchy's most reliable figures. She maintains an intense schedule of engagements and quietly supports the institution behind the scenes in ways that don't always get public attention. She's been a steady presence through decades of family turmoil. Camilla, on the other hand, has become an essential partner in Charles's public role as monarch. She spent years overcoming public hostility and has established herself as a calming, supportive presence alongside the king. Charles needs both of these women, and the wider family situation makes taking sides even harder. The fallout from the Prince Andrew situation is still ongoing. Prince Harry remains absent from the working royal family. Charles has his own health challenges. The institution is under enormous strain, and the last thing anyone needs is an open rift between the Queen and the Princess Royal. So for now, sources say Charles has chosen the traditional royal strategy, which is silence. Don't address it publicly, don't force a resolution, just let things sit. But silence doesn't actually resolve tension. Most of the time, it just postpones the moment when a decision becomes unavoidable. Eventually, Charles is going to have to navigate this because having lawyers involved in family property disputes is not a situation that just goes away on its own. The presence of legal documentation and how Sandringham is managed is genuinely significant for anyone who follows royal history. For generations, the way the family handled access to different residences was based entirely on informal agreements. discrete understandings about who would stay where during visits. These arrangements reflected a culture built on tradition and personal trust. The assumption was always that family members would work things out among themselves without needing to involve outside professionals. When lawyers start producing formal documents, it's a sign that those informal systems have stopped working. By having her legal team document usage rights, Princess Anne has turned what used to be a family conversation into a legal matter. The ultimate ownership of Sandringham hasn't changed. The estate still belongs to Charles, but written agreements create expectations that are much harder to adjust on short notice. What used to depend on goodwill and mutual understanding now has the weight of legal clarity behind it. And that shift is important because it suggests the internal relationships within the House of Windsor are evolving, moving from a structure based on tradition to one increasingly governed by formal agreements and legal protections. When legal language replaces family understanding, it usually means there are deeper problems underneath. You don't call the lawyers unless you think you need them. Sandringham has always represented something special in royal life. It's where the monarchs could temporarily set aside the ceremony and just exist as a family. Christmas traditions are preserved there. Long walks through the Norfolk countryside provide escape from public duties. Some of the most private moments in royal history have happened on that estate. But even this intensely personal space isn't immune to the tensions running through the modern monarchy. Princess Anne's legal actions have turned part of the estate into a symbol of division, a boundary line drawn within the family itself. For Queen Camilla, it represents an unexpected obstacle, and probably a personal slight, whether or not it was intended that way. For King Charles, it highlights the impossible difficulty of balancing family loyalty with the demands of leadership. And for anyone watching the monarchy, it raises a question that's hard to ignore. If the royal family needs lawyers to determine who can stay in which part of their private estate, what does that tell us about the actual state of relationships inside that family? The most revealing royal conflicts don't happen in public. They unfold quietly behind closed doors through the kind of legal paperwork that never makes a headline but changes the practical reality of how people live together, or in this case, how they don't. Now, I want to dig a little deeper into Princess Anne's specific motivation here, because I think there's more to this than just the Andrew situation. If you look at Anne's entire life trajectory, her relationship to physical spaces within the royal estate has always been somewhat complex. She doesn't have the same kind of sprawling portfolio of residences that some other family members have accumulated. Gatcombe Park in Gloucestershire has been her primary country home since 1976, a gift from the Queen that gave her genuine independence. But Anne has also maintained a consistent presence at the various royal estates throughout her life, and particularly at Sandringham. Her children, Peter Phillips and Zara Tyndall, grew up spending significant time there. There are decades of family memories tied to those rooms and corridors. So when I see Anne moving to legally protect her household's access to a specific wing, I don't just see a reaction to the current tensions with Camilla. I see someone who is thinking long-term, who is looking ahead to how the estate will be managed in the years and decades to come, and who is making absolutely certain that her branch of the family retains its place within that landscape. It's the kind of forward-thinking protectiveness that defines Anne's entire approach to life. She doesn't wait for problems to arise and then scramble to fix them. She anticipates, plans, and acts. That's who she's always been. And this brings me to something that doesn't get discussed enough when we talk about royal family dynamics. The generational shift that's happening right now is enormous. Queen Elizabeth was the gravitational center of this family for over 70 years. Her presence, her authority, her way of doing things, it all held the family in a particular orbit. When she died, that gravity shifted. Charles is now the monarch, but he doesn't command the same kind of unquestioned familial authority that his mother did. He just doesn't. And that means the old ways of resolving disputes, the informal conversations, the quiet deference to the sovereign's wishes, those mechanisms are weaker now than they've ever been. In that kind of environment, it actually makes complete sense that someone like Princess Anne would turn to legal structures to secure her position. She's not being dramatic or paranoid. She's being realistic about the fact that the old system depended on a figure who is no longer here, and the new system hasn't fully established itself yet. The legal paperwork is essentially a bridge between the informal past and whatever the future of the monarchy looks like. Anne is making sure her family doesn't fall through the cracks during that transition. There's another dimension to consider here as well, and it has to do with the broader question of how the royal family manages its private wealth and property in an era of increased public scrutiny. Every royal expenditure Every use of a residence, every allocation of resources is now subject to intense media and public examination. The days when the family could quietly shuffle properties around among themselves without anyone noticing are long gone. In that context, having clear legal documentation might actually protect everyone involved, including Charles and Camilla. If there's ever a future controversy about who's using what part of Sandringham and on what basis, having formal agreements in place provides a clear answer. It takes the ambiguity out of the equation. I'm not suggesting that Anne's primary motivation was to help Charles avoid future PR headaches. I think her primary motivation was to protect her own household's interests. But the secondary effect of formalizing these arrangements is that it creates transparency and clarity in a system that has historically operated on opacity and assumption. That's not necessarily a bad thing for an institution that is constantly trying to demonstrate that it is modern, accountable, and well managed. Let me also address something that I've seen floating around in the comments on some of our other videos. Some people have suggested that this whole situation is being overblown, that Camilla probably didn't even want that particular wing, that Anne's legal move was just routine estate management, and the media is making it into a feud because that's what the media does. And I understand that skepticism, I really do. We've all seen how royal stories can get exaggerated and distorted, but here's why I think this one is genuinely significant. In the world of the British aristocracy, and the royal family sits at the very top of that world, property arrangements are never just about property. They're about status, they're about influence, they're about who belongs and who doesn't. When you formalize a right of usage, you're not just securing a physical space, you're making a statement about your position within the family hierarchy. You're saying that your connection to that place is not contingent on anyone's goodwill or favor. It's established, it's documented, it's yours. That's a powerful message to send, and it's not one that gets sent casually. Anne doesn't do things casually. Everything she does is deliberate. So yes, on the surface, this might look like a routine legal matter, but in the context of the known tensions between these two women, the timing of it, and the history of how Sandringham has always been managed, I think it's entirely reasonable to read this as a significant moment in the ongoing evolution of the family's internal dynamics. And what about Camilla's perspective in all of this? I've spent a lot of time talking about Anne's motivations and the broader historical context, but I think it's worth sitting with what this must feel like from Camilla's side. This is a woman who spent decades being portrayed as the villain in a national love story. She endured a level of public hatred that most of us can't even imagine. She was called names in the press, blamed for the breakdown of Charles and Diana's marriage, and treated as an outsider who would never truly belong. She climbed a mountain of public disapproval to get to where she is now. And even after marrying Charles, even after becoming queen, there have always been whispers that she isn't quite accepted by certain members of the family. That some of them still see her as the newcomer, the interloper, the one who doesn't fully understand the weight of the institution she's now part of. Now imagine being in that position and discovering that your sister-in-law has lawyered up to make sure you can't use a particular part of the family estate. It doesn't matter how politely it's handled or how technically justified it might be. On a human level, that stings. It reinforces every insecurity about whether you're truly welcome. It sends a message that you are still, after all these years, someone whose presence needs to be managed and contained. I'm not saying Anne intended to inflict that kind of emotional damage. I genuinely don't know what her intentions were. But I do know that impact matters as much as intent, and the impact on Camilla here is unlikely to be positive. This also raises interesting questions about the future of Sandringham itself. Charles is not a young man, and he's dealing with significant health issues that have been publicly acknowledged. When William eventually inherits the throne, he will also inherit Sandringham as private property. William and Catherine already have a strong connection to the estate through Anmer Hall, which they renovated and have used as a family retreat for years. Their children have spent formative time there, riding ponies, exploring the grounds, building their own memories, just as previous generations did. When William becomes the owner of Sandringham, how will he handle these kinds of internal family disputes? Will he maintain the formal legal arrangements that Anne has put in place, or will he try to return to a more traditional and formal way of managing things? Will he have his own vision for how the different residences on the estate should be allocated? These are not idle questions. The way property is managed within the family has a direct impact on relationships, and relationships have a direct impact on the functioning of the monarchy as an institution. A family that is fighting over rooms and wings and access rights is a family that is distracted from the public duties it's supposed to be performing. There's also the question of whether Anne's legal move might set a precedent that other family members follow. If Anne can formalize her usage rights, why couldn't other members of the family do the same? Prince Edward and Sophie, for instance, have their own established presence at Bagshot Park. Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie have their own connections to various royal properties. If the culture shifts from informal understanding to legal documentation, we could see a cascade of similar moves as various family members seek to secure their positions. That would fundamentally change how the royal family operates internally. It would introduce a level of formal legal structure that has never existed before. Whether that's a positive development or a negative, one depends on your perspective. Some would argue that clear legal frameworks prevent misunderstandings and reduce conflict in the long run. Others would argue that introducing lawyers into family relationships poisons those relationships by replacing trust with contractual obligation. Both arguments have merit, and I suspect the truth lies somewhere in the middle. I'd also want to touch on the role that the late Queen Elizabeth plays in this story, even though she's no longer with us, because in a way this entire situation is a consequence of her absence. While she was alive, Elizabeth was the ultimate arbiter of family disputes. Her word was final, not because she had any legal authority over how her adult children lived their lives, but because her moral authority within the family was absolute. Nobody wanted to be the one who created problems for the Queen. Nobody wanted to add to her burdens. That created a powerful incentive for family members to resolve their differences quietly and to maintain at least the appearance of harmony. With Elizabeth gone, that incentive has disappeared. There is no longer a single figure whose disapproval carries enough weight to keep everyone in line. Charles is the king, but he's also a brother, a husband, a father. His relationships with the other family members are more complicated and less authoritative than his mother's were. Anne doesn't look at Charles the way she looked at Elizabeth. Camilla certainly doesn't, and so the old mechanisms of conflict resolution have broken down, and new mechanisms, including legal mechanisms, are rising to take their place. It's a natural evolution, but it's also a loss. Something intangible but real has disappeared from the heart of this family. Looking ahead, I think the most likely scenario is a prolonged period of quiet tension. Charles will continue to avoid taking sides. Anne will continue to go about her duties with her usual brisk efficiency, secure in the knowledge that her legal position is protected. Camilla will find other ways to carve out private space for herself, perhaps at a different property or in a different part of Sandringham altogether. The family will gather for Christmas and pose for photographs and smile for the cameras, and none of this will be visible on the surface. But underneath, the dynamic will have shifted. The relationships will carry the weight of what has happened. The trust that was already thin will have become a little thinner. And the institution will carry on, as it always does, because that's what the monarchy does. It survives, it adapts, it absorbs tensions, and keeps moving forward. But survival and adaptation come at a cost, and the cost here is being paid in the currency of family relationships. The question is how much of that currency is left, and whether there will come a point when the balance runs out. For now, the lawyers have done their work, the documents have been filed, and a wing of Sandringham has become a boundary line between two women who were never going to be friends. The story continues, and we'll be here to follow it wherever it goes. Let us know what you think down below in the comments.